If you followed the first part of this story, you felt the shock of my reunion with Fabiana in the lobby of that hotel, 20 years after my cowardly escape. Her eyes met mine, and the world stopped. Now, breathe deeply, because the silence is about to be broken, and the truths we kept for 2 decades are finally going to come to light. This is how our reckoning began. The 2-yard space that separated us was overcome by her in a few seconds. But to me, it seemed like an eternity in slow motion. When Fabiana stopped in front of me, her scent, the same sweet vanilla of 20 years ago, now mixed with a more expensive and sophisticated perfume, invaded my nostrils and unlocked memories I thought I had deleted from my system. She was there, solid, real, breathing the same air as me, with tearful eyes fixed on my face. The height difference seemed to have decreased, or maybe it was the high heels she wore. But her imposing presence remained the same, making me feel again like the insecure girl from the country, despite my tailored suit and my doctoral degree. "Erica?" She pronounced my name not as a question, but as a breath of incredulity. Her voice was deeper, more mature, but it carried the same raspiness that used to make me shiver during late-night study sessions. I opened my mouth to respond, to say a simple, "Hi," but my throat was closed, blocked by a knot of old emotions. I just nodded, unable to formulate a coherent sentence, feeling my hands shake so much I had to hide them in my blazer pockets so as not to betray my state of nerves. She didn't extend her hand for a formal greeting, nor did she move forward for a warm hug. She stood there, analyzing my face, as if looking for traces of the girl who once shared her life. The silence between us, in the middle of that noisy lobby, screamed louder than any lecture. I noticed that some people around us were beginning to notice the tension, the strangeness of that frozen interaction, and my social panic began to set off the fire alarm. "We can't talk here," she said, reading my discomfort with the same surgical precision as before. "There's a lounge area on the mezzanine. It's empty at this hour. Come with me." It wasn't an invitation. It was a soft command. And I, as if the last 20 years of independence had never existed, obeyed. I followed her steps toward the escalator, watching the swing of her hips in that elegant dress, feeling a dizzying mix of desire and fear. I was walking toward the courthouse, ready to receive my sentence. The mezzanine was a glass-walled area overlooking the busy city avenue, decorated with beige leather armchairs and artificial plants. It was deserted except for a waiter cleaning a table in the distance. Fabiana chose a secluded corner, sat in one of the armchairs, and indicated the other in front of her. I sat on the edge of the seat, my back straight, keeping my bag in my lap as a physical barrier between us. "You disappeared, Erica," she began, straight to the point, without detours or unnecessary niceties. She crossed her legs, and the fabric of the dress stretched over her thick thighs, revealing a bodily confidence that fascinated me. "I woke up. You weren't there. The rosary was on the floor. The suitcase was gone, and you never answered my calls." Her words didn't carry anger, and that was what hurt the most. They carried disappointment, a resigned sadness of someone who spent a lot of time trying to understand the incomprehensible. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air conditioning burn my lungs. I had rehearsed this moment in the shower 1,000 times over the years, creating eloquent speeches and plausible justifications. But there, before her clear and inquiring eyes, all the lies fell to the ground. I couldn't lie to the only person who had seen me naked in body and soul. "I was afraid, Fabi," I confessed, my voice coming out low and trembling, breaking the sterile silence of the hotel. "I didn't run from you. I ran from myself. I ran from what I felt that night." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes fixed on mine, absorbing every word. I continued, the sentences coming out in a rush, like a dam that finally breaks. I was 20 years old. I carried the weight of my entire family on my back, the weight of the church, the weight of sin. When I woke up and saw what we had done, how much I had liked it, I panicked. I thought that if I stayed, I would destroy my life. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I ran. I took off my glasses to wipe a traitorous tear that escaped, feeling exposed without my lenses. I was a coward. I know that. And I spent every day of the last 20 years regretting leaving that rosary on the floor and leaving without saying goodbye. I'm sorry. The request for forgiveness hung in the air between us, heavy and real. I didn't dare look at her immediately, afraid to see contempt. But when I finally raised my eyes, I saw that she was also crying, silent tears that ran down her perfectly made-up face without her bothering to wipe them. "You think you were the only one who was afraid?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. I was terrified too, Erica. I had never felt that for anyone, but I was willing to try. I was willing to face everything with you. And when you left... She paused, breathing deeply to control her emotion. I felt like the most disposable person in the world. I thought that to you, I had meant nothing. You meant everything, I interrupted, with a vehemence that surprised me. You were the only real thing that happened in my life. I got married, I got divorced, I built a career, but I never felt alive again, like in that room 304. The confession came out before I could filter it, raw and honest. Fabiana looked at me with a new intensity. Her lips parted. The hurt on her face began to give way to something different, a soft understanding that seemed to smooth the expression lines around her eyes. She stretched her hand over the coffee table, and in a hesitant gesture, touched my hand that was clutching the bag strap. Her skin was warm, and the physical contact, after 2 decades, sent an electric shock up my arm that made my heart race. It wasn't the touch of a stranger. It was her touch, familiar, comforting, and dangerous. "We're not going to solve 20 years of silence in 15 minutes of a break," she said, slowly withdrawing her hand but keeping her gaze locked on mine. "There's a closing cocktail tonight in the lobby bar, after the last lecture." She stood up, smoothing her dress, recomposing her successful doctor posture. But the look she gave me before turning was that of the dorm girl. "Meet me there, Erica. And please, this time don't run." I watched her walk away toward the elevator, the sound of her heels marking the rhythm of my anxiety. I stayed alone on the mezzanine, with my heart beating in my throat, and the feeling that the floor had disappeared under my feet. I had received a second chance, an invitation to reopen the door I had slammed so hard in the past. And as I looked at my hand, where her skin had touched mine, I knew that no matter how much I tried to rationalize, I would be at that bar. The hotel bar, located on the ground floor, had strategic lighting, designed to hide dark circles from long trips and encourage confidences that wouldn't be made under the sunlight. The environment was bathed in shades of amber and mahogany, with dark velvet armchairs and a grand piano playing soft jazz in the background, muffled by the constant murmur of conversations. I arrived early, perhaps too early, moved by an anxious punctuality that was always my social crutch. I chose a corner table, far enough from the counter to have privacy, but with a clear view of the entrance, feeling like a teenager waiting for a first date, not a 40-year-old doctor with a divorce behind her. I ordered a glass of red wine and kept spinning the glass stem between my fingers, watching the ruby liquid dance against the yellow light, trying to calm the internal tremor that had persisted since our conversation on the mezzanine. Every time the glass door opened, my stomach tied in a knot. I wondered if she would really come, or if, at the last minute, common sense or the reality of her life would stop her. I looked at my colleagues laughing and exchanging business cards, and I felt out of place, inhabiting a different frequency, tuned only to the possibility of her presence. When Fabiana walked in, the air in the room seemed to change density. She had changed her work dress for something more nocturnal, a black silk blouse that left one shoulder bare and tailored pants that perfectly traced her wide hips. She stopped at the entrance, scanning the room with that queenly posture that was natural to her, ignoring the looks of approval she received from some men at the bar. When her eyes found mine in the dark corner, she smiled, a contained, complicit smile that made the rest of the world disappear instantly. She walked to my table with firm steps, and I stood up in an automatic reflex of nervousness. Her scent arrived first, that mix of vanilla and something citrus that now seemed to be the only thing I could breathe. "I thought you might run again," she joked as she arrived close, but there was a real tension behind the joke. "I promised I would stay," I replied, my voice coming out firmer than I expected. "And I keep my promises, even if with a 20-year delay." We sat face to face, and the small table forced a dangerous proximity. Our knees brushed accidentally under the linen tablecloth, and I pulled my leg away as if I had received a shock, which made her raise an eyebrow, amused by my reaction. She ordered a gin and tonic with lemon from the waiter, and we sat in silence for a moment, just looking at each other, letting the music and the environment fill the gaps that words still couldn't cover. "You look great, Erica," she said softly, her eyes traveling over my face, stopping at my glasses, my mouth, my neck. "Time has treated you well. You look solid." I laughed, a short and humorless sound. Solid is a kind word for rigid. I became a serious woman, Fabi. Predictable. Exactly the opposite of you. "And who said I'm not serious?" she countered, picking up the glass the waiter had just brought. "Appearances are very deceiving, doctor. Sometimes a smile is just the most beautiful armor we found to wear." That sentence caught me off guard. I looked at her with more attention, trying to see beyond the perfect makeup and the tan. There was a melancholy in the depths of those clear eyes, a shadow I hadn't noticed in the euphoria of the first meeting. I took a long sip of my wine, feeling the alcohol warm my blood and loosen the grip on my tongue. "I thought about you," I let out, the confession falling on the table like a stone. "On every birthday, every Christmas. I saw your photos on social media. I saw your wedding. You looked so happy that I felt like an intruder just looking." Fabiana swirled the ice in her glass, the soft clinking filling the silence. She didn't look away from me. "Photos are snapshots, Erica. No one posts the Sunday night loneliness or the crying in the bathroom." She leaned forward, propping her elbows on the table, invading my personal space on purpose. I never stopped thinking about the what if. What if you had stayed? What if I had gone after you at the station? I have a good life, comfortable, but there's a place inside me that stayed empty that morning in 2004. And no one, absolutely no one, has been able to fill it. The weight of those words hit me like a punch. Knowing that I hadn't suffered alone, that I wasn't the only crazy person stuck to a youthful memory, was both liberating and terrifying. "I got divorced," I revealed, feeling the need to lay my cards on the table. "I married a good man. I tried to have the normal life my parents wanted, but it was like trying to wear a shoe 2 sizes too small. It hurt all the time. I could never truly give myself over because a part of me was still in that dorm with you." Fabiana reached out, and this time held my hand over the table. Her touch was firm, warm, real. She interlaced her fingers with mine, not caring if anyone in the bar was looking. "So, here we are. 2 40-year-old women, full of scars, drinking in a hotel and talking about ghosts." "And what do we do with the ghosts?" I asked, feeling my thumb stroke the skin of her hand involuntarily. She smiled, and that smile wasn't the successful doctor's, but the girls who took me to bed years ago. There was mischief, there was an invitation, and there was a promise. "We don't exorcise them, Erica. We invite them to sit and drink with us." She squeezed my hand. "I want to tell you the truth about my life, about my marriage. Because if we're going to relive the past, I need you to understand my present. but I need one more drink for that. The waiter approached to fill our glasses, and I felt that we were crossing an invisible line. The polite conversation was over. The nostalgia was over. What was starting there, under the amber light of that bar, was the naked truth we had avoided for 2 decades. And by the way she looked at me, with her mouth parted and her eyes dark with intensity, I knew the night was just beginning. The second gin and tonic arrived at the table, sweating in the cold glass, and Fabiana took a long sip before placing the glass back on the cardboard coaster, meticulously rotating it until it was perfectly aligned with the edge of the table. I watched every movement of her hands, fascinated and terrified of what would come next. I expected to hear a sweeping love story, the kind that would make me feel small and replaceable, or perhaps the account of a litigious divorce full of fights and hurt. I was prepared to be jealous, to feel anger, to feel guilty for desiring another man's wife. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my years of study or my life experience, prepared me for the truth that came from her lips in that whispered tone of confidence. Pedro is a wonderful man, Erica. He's kind, cultured, funny, and cooks the best mushroom risotto you can imagine. She made a dramatic pause, looking at the gold band shining on her left ring finger, and began to spin it, as if the metal were burning her skin. But he has a little detail that doesn't make it into the social columns. He prefers the company of the guys at the tennis club over mine in the bedroom. My wine glass stopped halfway to my mouth. I blinked a few times, trying to process the information, feeling my brain tie in a knot. "Are you telling me that?" I started, but the words seemed inadequate for the sophisticated environment of the bar. "I'm saying I've been married to my gay best friend for 15 years, she completed, with a sad and resigned smile. "And that our perfect marriage is the best told lie in the city's high society." The relief that invaded me was so physical and intense that I almost let out my breath audibly. The image of the perfect husband, which haunted me for years, crumbled in front of me, turning into smoke. Suddenly, the betrayal I thought she had committed by forgetting me so fast transformed into something much more complex and painful. I leaned forward, forgetting the wine, needing to understand how that vibrant woman had stuck herself in that golden trap. "Why, Fabi?" I asked, and my voice came out loaded with genuine compassion. "You could have had anyone. Why live in appearances?" She sighed, running her hand through her wavy hair, breaking her impeccable posture for the first time that night. "Do you remember how things were 20 years ago? To get a department head position at that conservative hospital, being single at 30 was almost a certificate of incompetence. And Pedro, well, his family is one of those traditional ones that would disinherit a gay son without a second thought," she continued, narrating the silent pact they made. "It was a trade, a contract for mutual survival. He needed a trophy wife to maintain appearances and inherit his father's clinic. She needed the stability, the top-tier health plan he offered at the time she was starting out. And above all, she needed a shield. After you left, Erica, I was broken. I didn't want to fall in love again. I didn't want to run the risk of giving my heart and being abandoned the next morning. Pedro offered me security without requiring romantic love. It seemed like the perfect deal. Hearing that was like taking a slap and a hug at the same time. I was the cause of that wall she built. My escape hadn't just isolated me. It had pushed Fabiana into a soulless marriage. I felt a sharp pang of guilt, but mixed with it, there was a dangerous hope starting to sprout in my chest. If the marriage was a fake, then her heart was free. "And what is it like, your life together?" I asked, feeling the ground carefully. "We are great roommates," she replied, shrugging. "We watch shows, we split the bills, we travel together to take beautiful photos for Instagram. But the bed is cold, Erica. For years. I sleep on one side, he's on the other, and there's an abyss of loneliness between the two of us. I'm 39 years old, and I feel like I'm withering inside. living the life of a porcelain doll on a shelf for a man who loves me as a friend, but will never desire me as a woman. She raised her eyes from the glass and stared at me with an intensity that made my blood heat up. "I miss being looked at," she confessed, her raspy voice falling an octave. "I miss that butterfly feeling, the smell of skin, the urgency. I miss being touched as if I were the most precious thing in the world. And the only person who touched me that way in my life was you." The noise of the bar seemed to vanish. The piano, the conversations, the clinking of glasses, everything became a distant hum. There was only Fabiana in front of me, stripped of her masks, offering her vulnerability on a silver platter. I looked at her ring again, but now it didn't seem like an insurmountable barrier anymore. It seemed like just a theater prop about to be put away in the dressing room. "Pedro met someone," she continued, lowering her voice, as if telling a state secret. "An architect. They're in love. Our deal is coming to an end, Erica. I'm going to ask for a divorce. I need to live a real life before it's too late. I'm tired of pretending." Her statement hung suspended between us, loaded with promises. She was telling me she was free, or about to be. She was telling me the place beside her was vacant. I reached out my hand and touched her wrist, feeling the fast pulse under the thin skin. "You deserve to be happy, Fabi. You deserve to be desired. And you?" She returned the question, turning her palm to interlace her fingers in mine, in a firm, warm grip. "Are you also tired of running? Because I see in your eyes the same hunger I feel. And I know you didn't come to this Congress just to watch lectures on pathology." I swallowed hard, feeling the heat rise up my neck. She was right. I wasn't there for medicine. I was there for her. And now, knowing the perfect husband was just a friend, there was no longer any moral excuse, any religious obstacle. Nothing to stop me from doing what I had wanted to do since the moment I saw her in the lobby. "The air here is getting a bit thin, don't you think?" I murmured, using the old tactic of diverting the subject to suggest an escape. But this time, an escape for two. Fabiana smiled, and that smile lit up the dark corners of my soul. She got the message. She finished the drink in one gulp, grabbed her bag, and stood up. "I need to touch up my makeup," she said, using the universal female code, but the spark in her eyes clearly said, "I need you. And I think the mirror in my room has much better lighting than the bathroom down here." I stood up, feeling my legs shake, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from anticipation. I left a $50 bill on the table to cover the wine, without waiting for the change, and followed her toward the elevators. The past had been left behind, resolved in 2 drinks and a confession. The present was going up to the 10th floor, and I was ready to live it. The walk from the bar to the elevator lobby seemed like it was miles long, a walk over embers where every step echoed the certainty that there was no going back. I walked half a step behind Fabiana, watching the line of her back, the way the fabric of her blouse moved against her skin, and the hypnotic swing of her hair. My rational mind, the one that turned me into a methodical and controlled doctor, tried desperately to pull the handbrake, screaming alerts about ethics, about the risk of getting hurt again, and about the madness of going up to a married woman's room. But my body, treacherous and hungry, ignored all logic, moved only by the gravitational force she exerted on me. When we reached the brushed steel doors of the elevators, she pressed the call button with a determination that made her fingertip turn white. We stood side by side, looking at the digital numbers slowly descending on the panel, avoiding looking at each other directly. The distorted reflection in the metal of the doors showed us as 2 blurred silhouettes, and I found myself thinking about how that image looked like our graduation photo, only now loaded with the weight of 2 decades of silences and untold secrets. Her scent seemed to expand in that waiting space, an invisible cloud that enveloped me and made me dizzy. The door opened with a soft sound, revealing an empty cab excessively lit by white LED lights. We entered as if entering a confessional. Fabiana pressed the button for the 10th floor, and the door closed. isolating us from the world outside, from the noise of the Congress and social conventions. Suddenly, the space, which would easily hold 10 people, seemed tiny, just for the two of us. The silence inside that metal box going up was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the motor and our breathing, which with every floor seemed to get shorter and heavier. I looked at her in the side mirror and saw that she was also watching me. Our eyes met in the reflection, and I saw a vulnerability in her that disarmed me. She was biting her lower lip, a nervous tic she had in college before anatomy exams, and her hands clutched her small bag against her belly as if it were a shield. Fabiana, the confident and worldly woman, was just as terrified as I was. That realization gave me a sudden courage, a desire to protect her, and at the same time, to consume her. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice low in the silence of the cab. It wasn't a question to dissuade her, but a final chance for her to back out if she wanted. She turned to me, ignoring the mirror, and the distance between us decreased dangerously. "I've never been so sure of a mistake in my life, Erica. If this is even a mistake." She sighed, and her breath, smelling of gin and lime, brushed my face. "I spent 20 years doing everything right. Everything they expected of me, and I'm exhausted. Today I just want to do what I want." The elevator stopped at the 10th floor with a soft jolt and a chime. The doors opened to a long, carpeted, and silent hallway, decorated with yellow wall lamps that created an intimate, dim atmosphere. We stepped out of the cab, and the sense of déjà vu hit me with the force of a train. That hotel hallway, with its numbered and closed doors, was a luxurious and adult version of our student housing hallway. The difference was that now there were no inspectors or fear of expulsion. There was just the two of us, and the terrifying freedom of adulthood. We walked side by side over the thick carpet that muffled the sound of our steps. I felt my heart beating in my throat, a tachycardia that had nothing to do with heart pathology, and everything to do with anticipation. With every door we passed, the tension increased, stretching like a rubber band about to snap. I could feel the static electricity emanating from her, and my hands were sweating cold, eager to touch her skin, but paralyzed by respect for the time we lost. She stopped in front of door 1012. While she looked for the key card in her bag, there was a moment of hesitation, a hiatus in time where everything could change. I looked at the back of her neck, at the stray hairs escaping her hairstyle, and I had an insane urge to kiss that exact spot where the neck meets the shoulder. I wondered if her skin would still have the same salty taste, if she would still make that low sound in her throat when touched. "The key doesn't want to cooperate," she murmured, with a nervous laugh, her hands visibly shaking as she tried to fish the card out from the bottom of her leather bag. "Let me help you," I offered, taking a step forward, invading her personal space. I placed my hand over hers, stopping the frantic search. Our fingers interlaced inside the bag for a second, in an intimate and clumsy contact. I felt the warmth of her palm and took out the white card, holding it as if it were the key to paradise. I swiped the card in the electronic lock, and the little green light flashed, accompanied by a mechanical click of unlocking. The sound was definitive. The final barrier between us had fallen. Fabiana looked at the green light, and then at me, her eyes dark and dilated, full of a hunger that mirrored mine. "Come in," she whispered, pushing the door and revealing the darkness of the room. "Please, Erica, come in and don't leave." I went in. The room was freezing from the air conditioning and smelled of impersonal hotel cleanliness, but I knew that in a few minutes that space would be impregnated with our story. I heard the door close behind me and the sound of the lock being turned. The final click echoed in the dark room, sealing our fate. We were alone, locked in, and for the first time in 2 decades there was nowhere to run, and I had no intention of trying. The click of the lock turning in the door sounded like a starting gun for a race I had been losing for 2 decades. When I turned around, The hotel room, with its impersonal beige decor and heavy curtains, disappeared from my peripheral vision. The entire universe was reduced to the woman standing 2 steps from me, breathing with difficulty. Fabiana dropped her leather bag on the carpeted floor, and the dull thud was the only warning before absolute silence took over the room. A silence charged with static electricity and terrifying expectations. I stood static, my back against the cold door, watching her. The yellow light of the bedside lamp drew shadows on her face, highlighting the curve of her jaw and the moist glint in her eyes. She didn't look like the confident doctor from the Congress, nor the trophy wife from social columns. She looked like my Fabi, the girl who sketched clothes in the late hours, but now with the density of a woman who learned to survive at the expense of her own happiness. I saw her chest rise and fall quickly under the silk of her blouse, revealing that her heart was as out of rhythm as mine. "Are you going to stand there by the door all night?" she whispered, her voice breaking on the last syllable, loaded with a vulnerability that made me shiver. Her question was the catalyst my body needed. I pushed off from the wood and took the first step, feeling my legs heavy like lead, but moved by an irresistible magnetic force. With every inch I advanced, the 20 years of distance dissolved, turning into dust on the floor of that room. I stopped in front of her, so close I could feel the heat emanating from her tanned skin. I raised my trembling hand, hesitant, afraid she was a mirage that would dissolve at the touch. When my fingers finally brushed her cheek, I felt the familiar softness and the thermal shock that made my knees give way. Fabiana closed her eyes at my touch and leaned her face against my palm, letting out a long, trembling sigh, as if she had been holding her breath since 2004. "Erica," she murmured my name against my skin, and the sound vibrated in my bones. I didn't wait for anything else. With a courage I didn't know I possessed, I held her face with both hands and ended the distance separating us. The kiss didn't start soft. There was no timid exploration of youth. It was a shock, a collision of 2 stars that had orbited alone for too long. Our mouths met with a desperate hunger, an urgency to regain the lost time, to say with tongues and teeth everything the unwritten letters and unmade phone calls left unexpressed. I felt the taste of gin, of mint, and of longing. Her mouth was warm, demanding, and devoured me with an intensity that left me dizzy. Her hands, previously passive, gained life and grabbed the lapel of my blazer, pulling me closer, gluing our bodies until not a single millimeter of air was left between us. I felt the wonderful contrast between my thin rigidity and the softness of her curves. A perfect fit of pieces made for each other. Her body, fuller and more voluptuous than in her youth, was a new map I was crazy to explore, and every touch of hers on my body lit fires where there was previously only ice. My glasses were in the way, hitting against her face in the eagerness of the kiss. With a sudden, impatient movement, I pulled them off and threw them on any piece of furniture, not caring if they broke. I didn't need to see clearly to know where I was. My hands knew the way. My fingers tangled in her hair, messing up her elegant hairstyle, pulling the strands firmly to tilt her head back and deepen the kiss. Fabiana moaned against my mouth, a raspy, primitive sound that detonated the last barriers of my rationality. We stumbled toward the bed, never letting go of each other, as if physical separation would kill us. The clothes, those expensive, well-tailored social armors, became unbearable obstacles. My hands, usually so precise and surgical, became clumsy in the haste to unbutton her blouse, trembling violently as they dealt with the fine fabric. When her skin was finally exposed under my hands, warm and soft, I felt a wave of possessiveness and adoration invade me. I wanted to mark every inch of her. I wanted to engrave on her skin that she was no longer alone, that she no longer needed to pretend. Fabiana pushed me gently until the back of my knees hit the edge of the mattress, and I fell sitting on the king-size bed. She didn't retreat. She came along, kneeling between my legs, at the height of my face, looking at me with an adoration that stripped my soul. She brought her hands to my shirt, opening button by button with an agonizing slowness, her eyes fixed on mine, devouring my reaction. "You are real," she said, her voice thick with emotion, as she slid her hands over my shoulders and down my arms, making every hair on my body stand up. "You are here, and you are mine." "I always was," I replied, pulling her to me, burying my face in her neck, intoxicated by the vanilla scent that was, and always would be, my home. We fell back onto the soft bed, a tangle of limbs, sighs, and sweaty skin. The world outside, the Congress, the fake husband, my divorce, the 20 years of silence, ceased to exist. In that dark room, lit only by the crack in the curtain letting in the light of the city, we rewrote our story. We were no longer two scared girls discovering sin. We were two mature women claiming the right to pleasure and love. And that night, while the city slept, we loved each other with the fury of those who know the price of absence and the priceless value of a second chance. The silence that settled in room 1012 was not the heavy, guilty silence of the student dorm 20 years ago. It was a sacred silence, like a temple, broken only by the sound of our breathing trying to find a normal rhythm again. We were lying in the center of the unmade bed, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that felt too fresh against our feverish skin. Fabiana had her head resting on my chest, and I ran my fingers through her hair, now completely tangled, feeling the dampness of sweat on her neck. I looked at the ceiling, but what I saw was the movie of my own life being rewritten at that exact moment. This time, there was no total darkness to hide our bodies. The city light came through the gap in the curtain, bathing Fabiana's skin in shades of blue and gray, allowing me to see the marks time had left on her. They were beautiful marks. There were small silver stretch marks on the hips I kissed with devotion. There was a small scar near the navel, maybe from a past surgery, that I traced with the tip of my finger. Youth has the beauty of untouched perfection, but maturity has the beauty of a lived history. And I loved that real version of the woman I idealized for 2 decades, much more than the memory I kept. "I had forgotten how to breathe," Fabiana whispered, her raspy voice vibrating against my ribs. She raised her face to look at me, and the smeared makeup around her eyes gave her the look of a tired rock star, incredibly sexy. "Pedro is my friend. I love him truly, but..." My body was in a coma, Erica. I felt like a piece of furniture in my own house. "You woke me up." Her words were both a balm and a wound. Knowing I was responsible for giving her life back filled me with pride, but knowing she lived so long in the drought of desire broke my heart. I held her face, feeling the softness of the cheeks that had now lost that baby fat of adolescence and gained the angles of a grown woman. "We lost so much time, Fabi." The confession came out of my throat with a bitter taste. "I could have kissed those scars when they were still fresh wounds. I could have held your hand when you felt alone in the middle of those social parties." She shook her head, placing her index finger over my lips to silence me. "Don't say that." Her tone was firm. We needed to live what we lived. If we had stayed together at 20, maybe we would have destroyed each other. You were too insecure. I was too spoiled. We needed to hit our heads against the world to learn to value what we have here now. Her wisdom disarmed me. She was right. The 20-year-old Erica would have been crushed by social pressure. The 40-year-old Erica, divorced and hardened, was no longer afraid of angry faces or whispers in hospital hallways. The night advanced without us caring about the clock. We ordered room service, a sandwich and a bottle of water, and ate in bed, laughing like teenagers, staining the sheets with crumbs, without the slightest etiquette. We talked about everything the unwritten emails didn't say. She told me about the loneliness of pretending to be the perfect wife at charity dinners. I told her about the sleepless nights in the lab, analyzing biopsy slides just not to have to go back to an empty house. Our personal tragedies, when shared, seemed to lose their weight, as if the load had been divided by two. But the conversation always died when our eyes crossed and gravity acted again. We couldn't go more than 10 minutes without touching. It was a thirst that didn't pass. A hand on the shoulder, a kiss on the neck, one leg interlaced with the other. The desire that night wasn't a single explosion. It was a constant tide, going and coming, drowning us repeatedly. We made love again, this time slowly, with the delicious laziness of those who know they have the whole night ahead. I memorized her body with my hands. I learned the new map of her curves, the places where she was ticklish, the points where the touch made her hold her breath. And she did the same with me, stripping me of my last armors. She kissed my hands, calloused and dry from washing with surgical soap, and said they were the most beautiful hands she had ever seen. She praised my thinness, which I always saw as weakness, calling me elegant. Under her gaze, I felt like a goddess, and not the nerdy pathologist hiding behind microscopes. At some point in the early hours, physical exhaustion won out. We lay spooning, exactly like on that fateful night in the dorm, but with one crucial difference. There was no fear. Her arm around my waist wasn't a chain, it was a seatbelt. Her scent wasn't a forbidden temptation, it was the smell of home. "Will you be here when I wake up?" she asked, her voice already thick with sleep, echoing her greatest fear, born from the trauma I caused. The question made my heart tighten. I kissed the inside of her wrist, feeling the pulse of life there. "I'll be here, Fabi. I'll be here for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. I'm not going anywhere." She sighed, satisfied, and fell asleep in seconds. I, however, fought against sleep. I wanted to stay awake to guard that moment, afraid that if I closed my eyes, I would wake up 20 years ago, alone and regretful. I stayed watching her profile in the dim light, listening to the soft hum of the city outside, and felt a peace I had never experienced in churches or prayers. My redemption was not in running from sin, it was in embracing love. When the first light of morning began to paint the sky light gray, the ghost of the bus station tried to haunt me. The setting was similar. The dawn, the loved woman sleeping, the possibility of taking my clothes and disappearing before the complications of real life began. Her divorce, my career, the geographical distance, all these would be giant problems in the light of day. But as I looked at Fabiana sleeping, I felt an iron anchor in my chest. I could face any scandal, any bureaucracy, any judgment. The only thing I couldn't face was one more day of my life without her. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, slept without dreaming of escape. Waking up beside Fabiana for the second time in my life could have been a traumatic repetition of the past. But the woman who opened her eyes in room 1012 was no longer the scared 20-year-old girl. When the morning light illuminated her face, revealing smeared mascara and tangled hair, I didn't feel the impulse to pack and run to the bus station. On the contrary, I felt a visceral need to take root right there, on that hotel mattress. I stayed watching her wake up, seeing the exact moment consciousness returned, and the reality of the facts hit her mind. I saw fear pass through her clear eyes, even before she said good morning. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice raspy with sleep, reaching out to touch my arm as if she needed tactile confirmation that I wasn't a hologram projected by longing. "I said I would stay," I replied, interlacing my fingers with hers and kissing her warm palm. "I have nowhere else to go, Fabi. My place is wherever you are." She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Fabiana sat up in bed, pulling the sheet to cover her body, a protective gesture that betrayed her insecurity. The euphoria of the previous night, fueled by gin and repressed passion, had evaporated, leaving behind the moral hangover and the mountain of practical problems she would need to climb. I saw her shoulders drop under the invisible weight of the life she built. "Pedro sent me 3 messages," she said, looking at the phone flashing on the nightstand with an expression of guilt. "He's asking if I want to have lunch with his parents on Sunday." The husband's name brought the real world into the room. I felt a pang of jealousy. Not romantic, but of the history they had. The domestic intimacy I didn't possess. But I breathed deeply, remembering who I was now. A grown, resolved, and patient woman. "You need to talk to him, Fabi," I said, keeping my voice calm, the opposite of the hurricane I felt inside. "Not for me, but for yourself. You said you were tired of pretending." She ran her hands over her face in an exhausted gesture. "I know. But it's hard, Erica. My whole life is tied to him. The clinic, our house, our social reputation. If I ask for a divorce, it's going to be a scandal. His family will hate me. My parents will say I'm throwing my future away. I'm 39 years old. I'm afraid of destroying everything and not knowing how to rebuild." It was at that moment that the role reversal happened. 20 years ago, she was the force of nature trying to drag me into the light, and I was the anchor holding us in fear. Now, she was paralyzed by the terror of disappointing others, exactly as I once was. I sat up in bed, ignoring my own nakedness, and held her shoulders, forcing her to face me. "Listen to what I'm going to tell you," I began, using my doctor tone for giving a difficult but necessary diagnosis. 20 years ago, I ran away because I thought I couldn't handle the weight of judgment. I thought the security of a normal life would be worth more than love. And I spent 2 decades unhappy, living halfway. Do you want to make the same mistake I did? Do you want to reach 60 wondering, what if? Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to lose you again," she confessed, her voice breaking. "But I don't know if I have your strength." "You don't need to have strength alone," I guaranteed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I have strength for both of us now. I have my career, my apartment, my life. I don't need you to support me or protect me. I just need you to be mine. If the world collapses outside, we'll build a shelter in the rubble. I'll wait as long as needed for you to resolve your life. A month, a year. I'll wait. But don't ask me to leave." Fabiana looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. The gratitude on her face was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She threw herself into my arms, hugging me with desperate strength, hiding her face in my neck. "I'm going to talk to him today," she promised, her voice muffled against my skin. "As soon as I get home. Pedro deserves the truth. He also deserves to be free to love whoever he wants without hiding." We stayed hugged for a long time, absorbing the magnitude of the decision just made. It wouldn't be easy. There would be lawyers, division of assets, gossip at social dinners, and sideways looks at the hospital. But for the first time, the weight of those problems seemed bearable because it was divided by 2. We got up to get ready, and the intimacy of that moment was as powerful as the sex from the night before. I saw her put on the Dr. Fabiana outfit, buttoning her silk shirt and fixing her hair. But now I knew that was just a costume. The real woman was the one who kissed me with the taste of toothpaste before we left the room. When the door to room 1012 closed behind us, I felt like I was closing a chapter of pain and opening the prologue to my life. We went down the elevator holding hands, and when the doors opened in the busy lobby, Fabiana didn't let go of my hand immediately. She held on tight for a few seconds, in front of everyone, before letting go with a complicit smile. "I'll call you tonight," she said, and it wasn't an empty promise. It was an oath. I watched her get into a taxi, heading toward the end of her marriage and the beginning of our story. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the car pull away in the city traffic, feeling the morning sun on my face. I was no longer afraid. I had 20 years of love stored in my chest, ready to be spent, and the absolute certainty that this time, the happy ending wasn't just a possibility. It was our destiny. 2 years, 730 days. That was how long it took for the hurricane of Fabiana's divorce to calm down, and for the dust of social scandals to settle, revealing the firm ground where we built our life. Today, as I watch the Sunday sunlight invade my living room, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air, I realize that happiness has nothing to do with the euphoria of Hollywood movies. Happiness smells like freshly brewed coffee, has the sound of cartoons on the TV, and has the sight of the love of my life wearing an old t-shirt of mine while she tries to flip pancakes in the skillet without burning them. I leaned against the kitchen doorframe, holding my warm ceramic mug, and allowed myself to just watch. Fabiana was humming an old song, purposefully out of tune, and swaying her hips to the melody. She was no longer the trophy wife, impeccable and unhappy, living for appearances. She was messy-haired, with flour on the tip of her nose, and looked 10 years younger than on that night at the hotel. Freedom had done wonders for her skin, but love had done miracles for her smile. "If you keep looking at me that way, I'm going to let the pancakes burn and the fault will be all yours," she said without turning, feeling my presence with that invisible radar that always existed between us. "I'm not looking," I lied, walking to her and hugging her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. "I'm admiring the view." She laughed, relaxing her body against mine, and I felt the absolute peace of knowing there was nowhere else in the world I'd rather be. Suddenly, a 3-foot-tall hurricane came running into the kitchen, breaking our romantic moment with the inexhaustible energy of a 4-year-old child. Juliana had the wildest curly hair and a smile missing a front tooth, the result of a fall at the park the week before. She hugged Fabiana's legs tightly, demanding attention and food with the urgency only children possess. "Mommy Fabi, Juju has a lion's hunger," she shouted, reaching her little arms up. Seeing Fabiana pick Juliana up and kiss her chubby cheek made my heart overflow in a way I never imagined possible for Dr. Erica, the confirmed bachelorette. Adopting Juliana had been a long and bureaucratic process, full of fears and uncertainties. But the moment the social worker placed that girl in our arms, we knew our family was complete. Juliana didn't have my blood or Fabi's, but she had our love interlaced in every cell of her being. We sat at the round kitchen table, a chaotic mix of cups, plastic toys, and juice bottles. I looked at my 2 girls laughing at an inside joke about a dog they saw on the street, and I felt such intense gratitude my eyes stung. I remembered the girl I was, the one who fled a dorm in the middle of the night carrying a suitcase full of guilt. If I could go back in time, I would hug that young Erica and say, "Calm down, it's going to hurt, it's going to take time, but it will be worth every second. You're going to have all this." Fabiana held my hand over the table, pulling me from my thoughts. Her thumb stroked the simple white gold band I wore on my ring finger. It wasn't an ostentatious diamond ring like her first marriage. It was discreet, solid, and true. Exactly like our relationship. "What are you thinking about, love?" she asked, with that sweet look of someone who knows all my silences. "I'm thinking that it took me 20 years to get here," I replied, squeezing her hand. "But I would do it all over again, exactly the same, just to be sure the final destination would be this breakfast." She smiled, and I saw the glint of tears in her eyes. "We didn't lose time, Erica. We just took the long way home." Juliana interrupted the moment, spilling a little juice on the tablecloth and making a comical face of astonishment. The 2 of us laughed and started cleaning up the mess, working as a team with the synchrony of those who have already shared much more than domestic chores. Later, while Juliana took her afternoon nap and the house plunged into a comfortable silence, we lay on the living room sofa, her head in my lap, my fingers in her hair. I looked at the shelf where, discreetly positioned between medical books and photos of our daughter, was an old wooden object, my grandmother's rosary, Fabiana had kept it. She gave it back to me the day she moved into my apartment, saying she kept it as a promise that one day I would come back for it. Today, it no longer represents guilt or the fear of sin. It represents the faith she had in us, even when I had none. Life isn't perfect. We have bills to pay, exhausting hospital shifts, and the tiring routine of raising a child. But when night falls, and I lie down beside her, feeling the heat of the body I desired for 2 decades, I know I am the most blessed woman in the world. I am no longer the girl who runs. I am the woman who stays. And staying, I discovered, is the greatest adventure of all. Thank you so much for following this journey of redemption and true love. If the story of Erica and Fabiana touched your heart and made you believe it's never too late to be happy, leave your like and subscribe now to the Forbidden Romances channel. Until the next story.